This is the Yashica T4 Super. In this video, I want to talk to you a little bit about the history of this camera, talk to you about some fun facts that I found out about this camera, give you some of my likes and dislikes when it comes to actually using this camera, because I've put a couple of rolls through it, so I definitely have some thoughts. And you should also stick through to the end so I can tell you what I really think about this camera and whether you should pick it up or not. So let's jump right into it. The Yashica T4, also known as the Kyocera Slim T, also known as the Kyocera 35mm camera, is a compact point and shoot 35mm camera. It was introduced by the Japanese Kyocera company in 1990. And if you know anything about 1990, that was an absolutely great year. It was also the year that I was born. This camera comes in a variety of different colors and names. There's a black version, a platinum version, a safari version. You can find one that just says Kyocera. There's one that says Super D. There's just a T4. There's a Slim T. So there's a lot of different varieties when it comes to this camera, but the one that I have here is the Super D, the one that has the super scope on top, and that's the one I'm going to be talking about in this video. This camera has a fixed focal length of 35mm, so there's no zooming function available, and it has a maximum aperture of 3.5. It is also an autofocus camera, so there's no option for manual focus. The shutter speed goes up all the way to 700 and comes down all the way down to 1 second. It has a built-in flash that, depending on the version you have, that may or may not work, and as I said previously, was released in 1990. Now to talk about the fun facts about this camera. When it comes to the price about this camera, I know it's not necessarily a fun fact, but the price could range anywhere from 500 all the way up to 900, 1,000 US dollars. When it originally came out in 1990, you could find this from anywhere between 200 to 250 US dollars, which is about 500 US dollars in today's dollars. And when it originally came out, it didn't do really well because a lot of people back then, based on the research that I've done, were looking for cameras that had a zoom function, and not too many people were thrilled with having a fixed focal length camera back in 1990. If you know anything about this camera, you know that it's popular. It's a popular camera that a lot of people talk about, and a lot of people say is one of the most premium cameras when it comes to point and shoot camera. And apart from the lens, which makes it really premium, another reason why this camera is popular is because it became synonymous with a now disgraced photographer called Terry Richardson. Back in the days when he used to shoot a lot of fashion shoots and shoot some celebrities, he used this point and shoot camera back when everyone was using pro cameras like this RB67, the RZ67. Back when pro photographers were using those cameras on set, he was using this Yashica T4. I think it was also the T4 Super. He used it at events. He used this for magazine shoots. He used this for celebrity photo shoots, and it became very popular back then. But then a couple of years ago, when people started getting back into film, this camera also became popular again within the YouTube sphere with celebrities, because people were using this camera because it had a very nice lens. Now let's talk about the physical properties of this camera. Right here at the front, you have your on-off switch. So right now it's off. I slide this here, it comes on. Slide this here, it goes back inside. This slides out. Again, turn it on. There you go. Right here you have your light meter and your focusing infrared thingy that it does. You have a small little rest place here that allows you to hold the camera nice and steady. Over here at the top right of the camera here, you have the flash. The flash is supposed to have like a flash cover, but this one that I have, the flash cover fell off, and that's why I was able to get it for such a good price, because the person that was selling it said the flash function doesn't work in all conditions, but it's fine for me. I don't really use a flash, but it is what it is. And here you have the crown jewel of the camera, which is the lens. You have the Carl Zeiss Tessa T-Star 3.5 35mm lens. This lens is beautiful. The lens is amazing, and again, the lens does stay protected. It goes in there, comes out there. On the top of the camera right here, you have this button right here is your mode selection button. You have your timer button, which is a 10-second timer, I believe, and you have your frame counter as well as your mode selector to show you what mode you're in, your super scope, which I use pretty frequently, as well as your shutter release button. When it comes to the modes on this camera, there are a couple of different modes that you should know about. The camera, once you turn it on and off, automatically every single time comes back to auto. In auto mode, the flash decides when it's going to go off or not. I'm actually going to put a link down in the description so you can read the manual if you don't have it. And then to switch the modes on this camera, keep your eye here. All you have to do is just press this button. If you press that button, it goes to the second mode. And make sure I'm in focus there. Okay, press that. It goes to the red eye. Obviously, that is to remove any red eye with the flash. Next mode, this is a flash on mode, so whenever you shoot a photo, the flash will be on. Next, you have your flash off mode. Self-explanatory. If you're in this mode, you don't want the flash to fire at all. The camera will stop down all the way to 3.5 if you're in this mode. This is an infinity mode. According to the manual, you're supposed to put it on this mode whenever you're taking a picture through glass or if you're shooting a landscape. I find myself putting it on this mode a lot of different times because I do like to shoot through windows. I do like to shoot landscape type of things. I did shoot landscapes in the auto mode before and everything was out of focus because the camera doesn't know what to focus on. But if it's in this mode, it's just going to shoot everything and make sure everything's in focus as much as possible. And that's the last mode. In this mode, no matter what you do, when you take the shot, the camera will automatically go back to the auto function. So it only shoots one photo at a time in this infinity/landscape mode. This is the back of the camera. I'm going to show you right here in the viewfinder right here. If you take a look, you can see that two buttons are going to flash. You have a red and a green. The red means whatever you're shooting is either out of focus or the flash is going to go off. And if it's just showing green, it means you're good to go and there's not going to be any flash. On the side of the camera here, you have the battery compartment. It does use the special 123A battery that you can find on Amazon. And yeah, it just slots right in there. And this goes off if you turn off the camera. If you turn off the camera, you see that goes off, so you're conserving battery. Once the camera comes on, it shows you the number of frames that you're on. And over here is the button to open up the battery door. To load the camera, you just gotta put your film in here, roll it over here, close the camera, and the camera goes to 1. If the camera stays on 0, it means you didn't load your film properly. If you load your film properly, the camera will always go to 1. I currently have film in there, so I'm not going to open up the back for you. But as I said, to load the camera, put your film in here. The camera is DX coded, so it only reads DX coding. If you don't have a DX coded film in your camera, it's going to default to 100. So put your film in here, slide it over, close the camera. The camera is automatically going to do everything else and takes everything all the way to 1. The bottom of the camera, you have your horseshoe mount as well as your rewind button. If you're shooting anything that, for example, if you're shooting and you want to take out the film before it's done, that's how you rewind it. If you're shooting a roll with just 24 rolls, that's how you rewind it as well too. And the camera does the rest for you. Now that we've talked about the physical properties of this camera, let's talk about the photos, right? Because the photos are what makes this camera actually so good. So I want to show you a couple of photos that I've taken using this camera, some in black and white, some in color. Take a look at them and let me know what you think about these photos. Now let's talk about some of the likes and dislikes that I have when it comes to actually using this camera. The first thing that I like about this camera is that it's small and compact. I don't know if you can see right here, it fits right in my hand. And yes, I do have bigger hands, but this is the smallest camera that I own. And a camera this small that takes beautiful images like it does, sometimes I have it in my pocket and I don't even know. It's much smaller than where's my phone? It's much smaller than my iPhone that I have right here. Definitely much smaller than the iPhone, even though it is thicker than the iPhone. Definitely it's much smaller than the iPhone in terms of length. Fits right in my top pocket, fits right in my jacket, and I can take it anywhere with me. The second thing I like about this camera is, of course, the lens. The lens takes beautiful images. I'm not going to waste another 10 minutes talking about the lens. It takes beautiful images, has a nice little compact structure, slides right into the camera when it's working. Another thing I really like about this particular version that I have is the waist level viewfinder. And the fact that the shutter is not as loud as other cameras is really nice because I can use this camera in so many different situations to take images that otherwise won't be able to take if I had to bring it up to my eye. So this has been really useful to me. It's not a gimmick. It's not something that is easy to use. It's something that once you do figure out how to use it, it becomes a nice little option that you can have when using this camera. Now to talk about some of the dislikes that I have with this camera. And the first thing that I have is that you cannot change the ISO value of this camera. And I know for most point and shoot cameras, you can't change the ISO value on the camera itself. There's different ways to go about changing the DX coding depending on what you want to shoot the camera on, so you can trick the camera on it. But the fact that you can't change the ISO setting on this camera is something that I don't like. On the Nikon L35AF that I have, you can change the ISO value so you can push and pull film. You can shoot expired film, and I do love to shoot my expired film. But on this camera, you can't do those things natively. And another dislike that is not necessarily something that's big, it's a little nitpicky on my part, is the fact that this camera does not remember modes. So this camera has a couple of different modes that I spoke about when I was talking about the physical properties. But let's say you're using this camera and you put it in landscape mode, or you put it in shutter and flash off mode. You shoot with it, you turn it off. When you turn it back on, everything goes back to auto. It does not remember the function that you had it on. So let's say you're trying to conserve battery, you shoot with it in flash off mode because you don't want to disturb people. You turn it back on without checking the mode setting and you shoot. Everything goes back to auto, and it's just a little frustrating to always have to change the functions, even though it takes like 2 seconds. It's just frustrating to always remember that when you turn the camera off, the modes change and everything goes back to auto. Another thing that I don't like when it comes to this camera is that it's an electronic camera. So if something breaks on it, number one, it's going to be extremely hard to fix, and number two, it's not going to be worth it. This camera is just going to turn into a $600, $700 paperweight. When it comes to point and shoot cameras, I don't think there's a better camera than this one when it comes to lens quality, when it comes to image quality, when it comes to sharpness, when it comes to usage, when it comes to compatibility and compactability, if that's a word. This camera is great. But is it worth the price? I personally don't think so. There's other cameras that you can get for cheaper that gives you as good quality as this camera that you don't have to pay so much for. And if you're a professional who's looking for a point and shoot camera that rivals the quality of what you're used to, this camera is definitely worth the price. If you're a beginner that has a lot of money to spend and you just want the best right off the bat, yes, then buy this camera. But if you don't have the money for this, if you're thinking, I just want something nice and small, that is compact, that I can use whenever, and it's just flimsy, I don't care if it breaks, and if you don't have enough money for it, this camera is not for you. Go buy something else. There's other cameras out there. There's a Canon short shot series. Buy one of those cameras. This camera is definitely not worth the price for you. And that brings me to the end of this video. If you want to check out some of the images that I shot on this camera, I'm going to put a link down in the description below to my blog, filmstockreel.com. I'm going to put all the images on there for you to check out. And also you can feel free to check out some of the other articles that I've written in the past. If you want to support the channel, make sure you do the things. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, as this goes a long way to making sure I produce more content like this. Until next time, make sure you stay safe, make sure you shoot film, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.